10 medicinal plants that are incredibly good for you. That is the walk we are going to take together today, you and me. And here's the plain truth of it, the thing I want you to carry home before we go one step further. About a quarter of every medicine sitting on that pharmacy shelf started its life as a plant, growing in the dirt, drinking the rain, and 10 of them are so good for you that they still shape modern medicine to this very day and still grow where near about anybody can find them. Now stay with me clear to the end because I am saving the biggest for last. The number one plant on this list is the one behind a medicine that took a child's near-certain death sentence and turned it into a nearly 9 in 10 chance of walking out of that hospital alive. Hold on to that thought. I promise you we will get there. My name is Amos, and for 60 years I have dug roots and gathered wild plants in these Appalachian mountains, the same hills and hollers my grandmother worked before I was ever big enough to read. I am not a doctor, so nothing I tell you today is medical advice. It is just an old root man sharing what the woods have taught him. Now, before we go any further, I have to be honest with you. Only a very small percentage of the people who watch this channel are actually subscribed. If you love the old healing plants, and the science finally catching up to what our grandparents already knew, even half as much as I do, then do consider subscribing. It is completely free and you can always change your mind later. It genuinely helps an old man keep making these. Right? Then let us get into it. And let me be honest with you about one more thing while we are speaking plain. For most of my life, the clever folks in their white coats looked down their noses at plant medicine. They called it superstition. They called it old wives' tales. But here is the funny part, the part that still makes me smile out on the trail. The old wives were right far more often than the professors ever wanted to admit. Because a long, long time before there was a laboratory, there was a grandmother with a basket, and she already knew which leaf brought the fever down and which root settled the belly. You want to know how far back this goes? There is a clay tablet dug up out of the ground written by the Sumerians about 5,000 years ago. 5,000 years. And already on that little slab of dried mud, some healer had listed 250 medicinal plants. 250! We did not invent this. We inherited it. And a great deal of what your doctor hands you now in a bottle with a long name on the label came straight out of a plant that some barefoot healer was already using before anyone could spell it. Think on that a moment. All that fancy chemistry, all those machines that hum in the big laboratories, and the starting point was a leaf, a root, a strip of bark. Nature had already done the hard part, working away quietly for millions of years, and all we had to do was be humble enough to pay attention. That is the whole thread I want to pull on today, so keep it in the back of your mind as we go. The old ways new, and the science is only now catching all the way up. So let us count them down, the 10 I want you to know, and whatever you do, don't go thinking that because a thing grows wild it is automatically safe because a couple on this list will stop your heart as quick as heal you. We will get to those, but we start gentle. Number 10 is the willow tree. Now you have walked past 100 of these and never thought twice. That droopy old willow leaning over the creek, but peel back a strip of that bark and chew it, and it is bitter as sin, and it will ease your aching head and pull your fever down. The old people knew this, and I do mean the old people. The healers of ancient Egypt wrote about it, the Greeks wrote about it, and folks in these very mountains chewed it too. Thousands of years back, all over the world, in places that had never once spoken a word to each other, people looked at that same tree and figured out the same secret. When that many separate people land on the same answer, you can bet there is truth in it. And then, a couple hundred years ago, the chemists finally caught up, pulled the working part out of that bark, tidied it up so it would not tear at your stomach so bad, and gave the world aspirin. That is right. The little white pill in your cabinet, the one that eases a headache and has saved more hearts than any of us can count, that started as an old man chewing willow bark by a creek, just like this one. Number 9 is chamomile, that sweet little flower that looks like a tiny daisy. My grandmother grew it by the door, and when the young ones could not sleep or their stomach was in a knot, she would steep those flowers in hot water and let it cool and give it to them in the evening. A warm cup of chamomile to settle the nerves and coax you toward sleep. Now I am not going to sit here and tell you it is a miracle. It is a gentle thing, a kind thing. But there is real reason folks have leaned on it for calm and for an upset stomach for thousands of years, and there is nothing wrong with a plant whose whole job is to ease you softly into rest. Number 8 is ginger, that knobby root you can buy at any store, and this one I want you to remember next time your belly is rolling, because ginger is one of the finest things the good Lord ever grew for a sick stomach. Feeling queasy, carsick, A poor soul going green on a boat? A woman in her early months carrying a child and unable to keep a thing down? Ginger has settled all of them for hundreds and hundreds of years, and here's the part that pleases me. The science backs it up plain and simple. Study after study, they keep finding the same thing the old folks knew. It calms the nausea, it is cheap, it is safe, and it is sitting right there in the produce aisle for the price of pocket change. My grandmother kept a piece of ginger by the stove the way some folks keep a bottle of aspirin, and she would grate a little into hot water at the first sign of a queasy grandchild. Never failed her, and it has never once failed me. Number 7 is garlic, and do not turn your nose up at it. That same clove that flavors your supper has been used as medicine since before the pyramids. They fed it to the men who built those great stone tombs to keep their strength up. And the science today tells us garlic does gentle good things for your blood and your heart when it is part of how you eat. Now I will be honest and modest with you, it is a food, not a cure, and I will not oversell it. But there is a reason healers across every land reached for garlic for thousands of years. It is one of those quiet, everyday plants that has been looking after people the whole time. Now we turn a corner, and I need you to listen close, because number 6 is a beauty and a killer both. Number 6 is the deadly nightshade, and I mean deadly. This plant grows a berry that looks, to an untrained eye, near enough like a little blackberry or a blueberry. In 2009, a grown woman was rushed to the hospital after she ate just 6 of those berries, thinking they were blueberries. 6, and about 10 of them can kill a person stone dead. So whatever you do, don't ever eat this plant, and don't let a child near it. I mean that. But here is the wonder of it. The very poison in that berry, once the chemist tamed it down to a careful, measured dose, became a medicine called atropine, and atropine sits on the World Health Organization's list of the most essential medicines on this earth. Surgeons use it. It can widen the eye so a doctor can look inside it, and it is one of the antidotes we reach for when someone has been poisoned by certain nerve agents or farm pesticides. The same plant that murders can also save. That is the whole mystery of this walk we are on. Now this is the part I promised you at the very beginning, so let me look you in the eye and say it again before we climb higher. The number 1 plant, the one waiting for us at the very top of this list, is the one behind a medicine that turned a child's near certain death into a nearly 9 in 10 chance to live. Keep it in your heart. We are almost there, but first the ones that change the whole world. And if you are still with me this far up the mountain, do me one small kindness and tap that like button, and subscribe if you have not yet. It is a little thing, but it tells the folks who run these things that an old rootman stories are worth hearing, and it lets me keep telling them. Now back to it, because these next ones are the giants. Number 5 is the cinchona tree from the high forests of Peru. And this bark, this humble red bark, is one of the first true weapons mankind ever had against malaria, that fever carried on the bite of a mosquito that has haunted people for as long as there have been people. The healers of the Andes knew that bark. They ground it and they used it, and out of it came quinine, the medicine that let folks finally stand and fight that killing fever instead of just dying of it. Later on, the chemists built another malaria medicine off the back of it too. Whole parts of this world were opened up, and countless lives were saved because somebody paid attention to what the mountain people already knew about a tree. Number 4 is one you would never guess, a scraggly little plant they call goat's rue, and in the old days some called it Professor Weed. Folks in Europe and the Middle East used it for sugar sickness, what we now call diabetes, all the way back in the Middle Ages. They noticed it brought something down in the blood, and centuries later the chemists took the working part of that plant, gentled it, tamed it, and made a medicine called metformin. And listen to this. Metformin is today one of the most prescribed medicines in the whole world, taken by a great many of the roughly 400 million people living with the common kind of diabetes. It is cheap, it is safe, and here is the humbling part. After all these years, the doctors still do not fully understand every last thing about how it works. A weed knew a secret we are still trying to read. And the irony that makes me chuckle, here in America that same plant is listed as a noxious weed because it spreads where it is not wanted. A weed to some, a lifeline to millions. Number 3 is sweet wormwood, and this is a story that ought to be told around every fire. You remember I mentioned malaria? Let me give you a number that will sit heavy on your chest. It is thought that malaria has probably killed about half of all the human beings who have ever lived. Half of everyone who ever drew breath. So back in the last century, a scientist named UU2 went looking for something to fight it, and she did not start in a laboratory. She started in the old books. She read through thousands of ancient Chinese remedies, and she kept finding one plant named again and again sweet wormwood, but she could not get it to work. Until she read the words of a healer writing all the way back in the year 340, who said you must use the fresh leaves in cold water, never boiling. That old whisper was the key. The heat had been destroying the medicine the whole time. She listened to a voice 1600 years dead, and out of that leaf came a whole family of malaria medicines that are still saving lives today. And in 2015 they gave her a share of the Nobel Prize for it. An old recipe, a patient woman, millions of souls spared. Number 2, and we are nearly at the top now. Number 2 is a tree from a swamp forest in Malaysia, and I tell you its story as a warning as much as a wonder. Back in 1987, a botanist brought home a sample from that swamp, and when they tested it, it did something remarkable. It blocked the virus that causes the sickness we call HIV from copying itself inside the body. A real, true hope. So the man went back to that swamp to gather more of the tree, and it was gone. Cut down, somebody had taken it for firewood. Just firewood. That cure was nearly lost to the world forever, and it was only saved because the right kind of that tree still happened to be growing, of all places, in a botanical garden. Think on that. We very nearly burned up a cure before we ever knew its name. And I promise you, that is happening somewhere on this earth right now, in a forest nobody is guarding. And now, at last, we come to it. Number 1. The one I promised you at the very start of this walk. And it is a small thing, a pretty thing, a little flower called the rosy periwinkle, and it grows on the island of Madagascar. The local people had used it for generations for all manner of ailments, the way we mountain folk use the plants around us. And back in the 1950s, researchers took a hard look at that little flower, and what they found inside it changed the world for the smallest and most frightened among us. They pulled out 2 medicines from that plant that do something extraordinary. They stop cancer cells from dividing, stop them dead in their tracks. Now here is the number I have been carrying for you this whole time, the promise I made you way back at the start. There is a cancer of the blood that strikes children called childhood leukemia, and back in the 1960s, if your little one came down with it, you were most likely burying that child. The survival was only about 10%, 10 out of 100, 90 families out of 100 going home to an empty little bedroom. Sit with how cruel that is for just a second because I want you to feel the weight of what comes next. And then the medicine from that little rosy flower came into the fight. And today, because of it, and the treatments built alongside it, well over 80% of those children live. It went from about 10% to over 80%. From a near certain death sentence to a nearly 9 in 10 chance to grow up, to run and play, to graduate, to one day hold children of their own. Think of every one of those lives. Think of the birthdays that got to happen because somebody looked closely at a flower. And the sister medicine drawn from that very same plant is a cornerstone of treating other cancers too. The kind in the lymph glands, and the kind that strikes down young men in the prime of their lives. A weed on a faraway island. A little flower a child could pick without a second thought and tuck behind her ear, and it has quietly snatched more little ones back from the edge of the grave than I have years on this earth. If ever you doubted that a plant could be a holy thing, there is your answer growing wild in the grass. So there they are, the 10. Willow and chamomile, ginger and garlic, the deadly nightshade and the cinchona bark, the goat's rue and the sweet wormwood, the swamp tree from Malaysia, and that little rosy flower up on top. And I want to leave you with a thought to carry out of these woods. A full quarter of everything in that great shining pharmacy came out of the woods and the fields and the swamps, off the bark of trees and the roots of weeds and the petals of little flowers no bigger than your thumbnail. Our grandmothers and grandfathers were reading the label long before there was ever a label to read. They did not have the fancy words for it, and they could not tell you the chemistry, but they had the wisdom, passed hand to hand and mouth to ear across the years. And the next great cure, the one that might one day save your grandchildren, may well be growing right now in some swamp or some holler that nobody has thought to look at yet, quiet, unnoticed, and one careless axe or one paved-over field away from being lost forever. That is why an old man keeps walking these hills, so walk gentle out there, and look down once in a while. There is more medicine underfoot than we will ever rightly deserve. Now, I always like to hear back from you, so let me leave you with 2 questions to answer down in the comments. First, which of these 10 surprised you the most? And second, what plant did your own grandmother or grandfather swear by, the one remedy that got passed down in your family? Tell me. I read them, and I learn from you every single time. You look after yourselves now, and stay close to the ground where the good things grow. Come walk the woods with me again soon. Because next time, I want to tell you about the poison that heals. There is a plant growing in these very woods, a tall and beautiful thing that can stop a person's heart cold and lay them in the grave, and yet a doctor will still reach for it, careful as anything, to steady a failing heart and keep it beating. How can the very same plant be both the murderer and the mender? That is a story worth sitting down for. But that, my friend, is for next time.